Video. Yes, EfilDay 18, I think. Something like that, anyway. Sorry, camera. Stay. Yeah, birth and afterbirth. Yeah, that's what life is, right? Birth, and then there's the afterbirth. Yeah, yeah, life sort of gets that way. Just kind of messy, sloppy. Slop, yeah. So anyway, I was thinking about the arbitrary nature of personality, of what you become, what your desire mechanisms are. And we have all these individuals on planet Earth, and you can certainly categorize them. You know, communist, capitalist, I don't know, liar, not liar, cheater, not cheater, whatever. Optimistic, pessimistic, half glass half full, glass half empty. You know, and how do we acquire these personalities, these elements, these categories, these combinations of personality elements, things that charm us. You know, our definition of beauty, and our definition of harm and horror. Some people, I mean, you know, there's just such a variance in terms of what people call a good time. They have a whole big pile of TV shows make huge money, and I find them obnoxious to my senses. You know, I can't see any value in them at all. They're preposterously stupid and insensible to me. They do nothing for me, and yet they obviously do something for other people, lots of other people. And there's probably vice versa examples of where I fit into some majority category, and some minority person might find it implausible or impossible that people could find value, see value, or vice versa, not see a harm, be immune, inert to finding something just unacceptable, horrific, something they would pay real money to prevent happening in the world, if they could. And it's just strange that we come from the same planet. We largely grow up watching the same manufactured pop culture, and yet people do, through experience, through different unique experience, acquire these very different sensibilities. And some of them are biological, some of them are more innate to some sort of chemistry you're born with, like the addictive nature of some people versus others, tendencies in terms of physical appearance and whatnot that people may be more comfortable with because they know that's where they're heading, or that's what their family, that's what they come from, or that's what in some other way nurtured them. So you can have these variances regarding even things like definitions of attractive or ugly. The point is, I suppose, is just that when you analyze it and look at, see how arbitrary it is, how void of rational standard any of it is, that these very intense, very powerful emotional responses, feelings, have no intrinsic credibility. There's just the feeling that has the value. The passion is the value. What we're passionate for is erroneous, is meaningless, because the value judgment is void of any kind of credibility. I've sort of tried to point that out in the past in other videos in the series, just the fact that our intelligence can do rational it can be more rationally pure in terms of defining and describing a circumstance, where our subjective senses, our subjective innate initial reactions, so to speak, are very corrupt and very personalized to experience. And yet for, I think, most people, there's little distinguishing between their knowledge or understanding of a circumstance and how they feel about the circumstance. Most people are living life feeling their way through it and not really seeing it with the better part of their brain. So it's as if a sense that could tell them more about the context of what they're doing is turned off. It's like their vision is off because they're not recognizing its capacity to do that. They're just using it internally, their intelligence, to derive mechanisms to get them to what they desire. So they're so caught up in the cheese chase that they don't take any time to contemplate how they became what they are, why they feel the way they feel, why they react the way they react, and whether any of those reactions have any real integrity, whether any of those perceptions of value are real or just a manifestation of their attachment, their addiction. I've used the example of heroin addiction and other addictions, and the real point of the example is that the non-addict can easily see how silly that chase is, how stupid and unproductive that attachment is, how corrosive it is to anything valuable, and how fertile it is for creating all kinds of harms and damage to not only the individual but everything around him, and that it's just obvious that this is not a way to live. And yet for the addict, the game is rich. They're seeing purpose because they're in a life or death struggle in some ways, and that's distracting enough, and that's controlling enough, and that's all there needs to be. And I guess that's part of this, is there's the difference between being a rat in the maze and being a rat who has climbed the wall of the maze and understands they're in a maze and can see the manipulations, can see the seductions, the things pulling them and the thing pushing them. And if they really look, if they take a lot of time sitting on the top of the maze, the edge of the maze, and looking down and watching, they might realize that it's all push. It's all this aggravation force, this force propelling them, obliging them, extorting them. That there is no real positive that they're chasing. It's just the negative of the absence, the negative of the sensation of want and need and desire, the mechanism of a sensing, merely just sensing, not understanding, not knowing, but just sensing need, sensing that something needs resolution, sensing that there's a void, sensing a deprivation that's completely manufactured. So when I've used examples like other planets and other civilizations and all the things we don't miss, all the things we don't seem to have any sense of deprivation, and yet we think the world would be deprivated not only by the absence of our individual selves, but by our family kind, maybe, or our race. Like somehow the planet Earth and the human race just wouldn't be the same without our race or our form of human. All these are just the same mechanism, the same attachment mechanism of as crude as our definitions of, say, beauty, our attractiveness, our desirability, and that these attachments, it's just nepotism and nationalism and racism and whatever the other isms you can come up with. But they're just these bigotries built into our sensibilities that define value for us in a crude manner to our senses, that make things feel hot and cold. Maybe that's a good example, because a sensation like hot and cold is so common. It's so, we share it. We share a very similar taste, a very similar thermostat for its definition. We have a huge amount of commonness in that definition. And yet in these other things, these other sensations, these other measures of value, our thermostats are so different. What's too hot or what's too cold is so individual, so irregular. There is no normal. There's just a bunch of standard group types, and maybe there's a dominant group type, but basically there's nothing that is indicative of a standard. And that even with something like hot and cold, our standard is dictated by the biological comfort, theoretically, of the cellular life that makes us up. It doesn't really have to do with some absolute statement about what is a hot temperature and what is a cold temperature, or some empirical statement. It just has to do with what is good or bad for cellular tissue. Yeah. So anyway, that's probably enough. Keep it brief for a change. But yeah, we're just all caught up in this game, the mechanism of playing. I mean, right now I'm really down and disinterested and disgusted, and it's all just psychological perception. It's all just a psychology, theoretically, with a few little boosty programs, a little bit of a program running inside of me that would just obnoxiously say, now let's get back in the game, let's walk back into the maze and get the smell of the cheese in our nostrils, and get back to running the race. And it's conceivable and doable, but the mass of my programs have rejected that possibility and just said, nah, let's not, and say we did. Why pretend? Why bother? And there's a whole conversation. I guess I could go through the whole conversation inside my head, the rationalizations. It is work to pretend a life. It's a lot more work than just living it. It's harder to be smarter. I think it is, just basically. You pay a higher price for it because there's more to notice, there's more to get distracted by, to lose your focus to, and to have values diminished. And I guess that's part of it, is that you really do have to live such a lie to get caught up in it. Because if you know how expensive it is, how much it costs every day, even though it's fun to get lost in it, if you know the price of that, if you knew what it cost, the admission cost, it's like if you went to Disneyland, and when you bought your ticket, you bought it in some sort of real blood, some sort of real pain and suffering, where you knew somebody was going to be harmed, or some animal was going to be tortured for the whole time you were enjoying yourself in the park. That they were put on a skittle, to be slowly fried. even if it was something you couldn't do anything about. The fact that that's the circumstance would be distracting. It would be sensibly difficult to play the game, to enjoy yourself, if you maintained any awareness at all of the price of that admission. Yeah. Anyway, enough of a video. I think I'm a day behind, but yeah, I'll work on it. Until next time.